Welcome back, everybody. I'm Caleb Dennison for Digital Trends, and today we're reviewing the LG SM9000 series LED LCD TV. I got the 65-inch model back there, and we're going to dive right into picture quality straight away. But before we do that, I got a correction to make. So if you didn't happen to watch the unboxing and basic setup video for this TV, I suggest you do that. Click right up there. It covers stuff like the TV's aesthetics and the user interface and what it's like to set up the television. If you did, however, watch that video, you probably caught me making a big old mistake. I suggested this TV didn't have HDMI 2.1 features. That is complete BS. Of course it does. It has HDMI 2.1 spec across all of its HDMI inputs and therefore supports EARC, variable refresh rate, auto low latency mode, that kind of stuff. Sorry about that. I made a mistake. LG, actually, I was one of the first people to find out from LG that they were doing this right ahead of CES and broke the news with everybody else. Of course I know this, but I made a big mistake. I had a brain fart. All right, so outside of HDMI 2.1, the key difference between this TV and LG's flagship right above it is that it doesn't have full array local dimming Pro. It has full array local dimming, but not the Pro version, which I suspect comes down to how many zones of local dimming it has. We'll count those in a second. Outside of that, everything else is the same. It's got the Alpha 7 Gen 2 processor. It's got Nanocell technology, so presumably you're getting better color at off angle. Has an IPS panel also helping with the better off angle viewing. We're going to test all that stuff, but first, let's check out how many zones it's got. Okay, start counting. Count along with me here. There's a total of 12 horizontal zones on this particular TV. This is the Spears & Munsell UHD benchmark test disc. Shout out to Stacy Spears and Tyler Pruitt for getting this to me. So 12 zones horizontally, not terrible, I guess, but what really shocks me is that there are only 4 zones across the top, or vertically speaking. Do the math, and that is 48 local dimming zones, which is not a lot, so I expect to see that reflected in black levels and halos. Now let's check screen uniformity. We've got a 100 nit full field white pattern here, and there's definitely some vignetting going on in the corners. It's not super heavy. I've seen worse. And also, you see it less if you're sitting right in front of the TV, but if you do go off angle, you can see it more. There's some vertical banding going on here. I see 3, maybe 4 total. It'll be interesting to see if this exposes itself when we watch real world content. Now check this out. This is a torture test for the local dimming system. This is a star field, and you can clearly see the splotchiness happening here. That's the local dimming trying to keep up with what is admittedly a really hard thing to resolve. But hey, you watch Star Trek, you watch Star Wars, you're gonna see that kind of thing. So I'm not really stoked about the full array local dimming on this TV. At least with a torture pattern like this. We'll take a look at some other content to see what this plays out like in real life. Now I want to take a look at how this TV is tone mapping HDR, and here we're looking at a ramp where it pretty much washes out at around 1100 nits, which is not to say it's hitting 1100 nits, it's just taking any code value above 1100 nits all the way up to 1000 and just peaking it out as bright as it can get. So I've switched over to my VideoForge Pro from SpectraCal. Thanks for letting me use this, guys. This is an SDR, and when you're off axis, you can definitely see quite a bit of blooming. That's a product of just having 4 zones on the top. Let me switch this into HDR. Now we're in HDR, and as you would expect with much brighter boxes, we're seeing a whole lot more of this blooming around these white boxes, and we'll see that in this other test pattern here as well. Again, we're in HDR, and you can see that a lot of what should be black is a little bit milky. One last pattern I want to show you before we watch some really good stuff. I'm not particularly impressed by this particular test pattern. I'd expect to see a much more intense white in the middle, even though this is SDR, and then something odd is happening here where it's dropping out to black and then it's bumping it up back again here. I suspect, again, that's a product of the local dimming system only having 4 zones across the top. Seeing more or less the same thing with HDR, although there is a slightly brighter center here, but the ramp is just not as smooth as I'd want to see it. And of course, over here, I'm seeing kind of a milky gray instead of a true black. Test patterns are great because they let us get really, really granular with the TV, but they don't tell the whole story. Sometimes what we see in test patterns, we don't actually see in real life content. So I want to look for a few things, and right away I'm definitely seeing some vignetting happening over there. So it does expose itself in certain situations where you have a big wash of color and it's easier to see that it's a little bit dimmer on the edges. The color at first comes off as very bright and vibrant, but I've noticed that with this TV, the yellows have a little bit of a green hue to them. It's just a little bit off. I suppose you could fix that with a calibration, but I'm not sure that this is the type of TV that somebody's going to call in a calibrator for. Now, how about the halo that we saw in the test patterns? Does it bear out here? Well, it's not often that you get an image like this, which is stark black with something very bright in the middle going all the way down, but I can very clearly see the halo around that object. Now, when the object gets a little bit bigger and there's less of a black canvas to look at, what I've noticed is that's a whole lot less obvious. This is a good example. Yes, there is still a little bit of halo happening around this feather, but it's much less pronounced than when you have a very small bright object on a very big black background. And when there's no black background to contend with and you've got a full field of color, it really pops. It does a great job of that. So I think there's a dazzle effect that you're going to get. Say you're going to check this TV out at your local electronics retailer. This kind of footage is what you want to see, something that goes back and forth between very dark scenes with bright objects and full field, full color scenes. Here's something that really caught me off guard. We're going to have some wind turbines come up. Check out the tips of the turbine blades. They are juddering like crazy. There's a lot of stutter there, and you can actually see it in the edge of this close-in shot of the turbine. I totally wasn't expecting that, and that makes me very concerned about fast-moving sports scenes. I'm not sure that it's going to have the cleanest motion resolution. Here's another interesting thing that I'm seeing, especially with all these bird shots that we have, is that there's almost like a moire effect happening in these areas where there's a lot of detail. It kind of shimmers and shakes a little bit. The processor is obviously having a difficult time taking care of all of these really intricate textures and colors that are happening on the screen right now. We don't see that so much with something like this, which is less complex. And when, in fact, you have a still image like this, there's some really nice detail happening, and the highlights come off really nicely as well. Now let's talk about how it does with cable TV upscaling. That's still primarily what a lot of people watch, and it's not ever been that great. We're talking about low bitrate content, usually at about 720p, so there's not a whole lot for the TV to work with to make it look better. What I'm seeing here is kind of par for the course with upscaling. First of all, I'm noticing that the yellow, again, seems a little bit off just to my naked eye. As for the resolution, it's not seeing a whole lot of improvement here, but that's par for the course. Most TVs upscale at about the same quality, unless you're talking about a bargain basement TV with really lousy processing. It's doing the best it can with what it's got, but is it as nice as what you're going to stream from Netflix or put in a 4K Blu-ray disc or even a standard Blu-ray? No, absolutely not. Cable still looks kind of crappy. So I really rake this TV over the coals, and it's not exactly targeted at video files, which is a good thing because I don't think it's a good TV for video files. For the everyman who wants a big, bright, beautiful television for a reasonable price, I think it suits that, but of course there's other options out there. A lot of the issues that I saw on this TV, granted, were granular things, but I think they play into the overall video experience. And I gotta say, I didn't see a lot of this with, say, the TCL 6 series, for instance. So there's a lot going on for this TV. HDMI 2.1 is a big deal. I also like the WebOS system fairly well. And of course, it's gonna offer the Apple AirPlay 2 and HomeKit integration very shortly with a firmware update. So there's a lot of fun stuff with this TV. And look, when you look at content like this, big, bright, beautiful, the TV presents it exceptionally well. But if you're the sort of person who's going to be in a dark room watching a lot of movies or a lot of sports, not sure it's the best option. If, however, you're a serious gamer, give this TV a look. You're going to get HDMI 2.1 with variable refresh rate and auto low latency mode, which is great for gaming. It has relatively low input lag. Also, it's about $1,000 for a 55-inch and $1,400 for a 65-inch. So definitely an option there. Overall, I'm kind of conflicted. There's some things here that have me going, meh, you know, because for the price, I feel like you can do a little bit better. But then again, LG's got some specific features that attract certain folks. So if you're in the market for this TV, go check it out for yourself, see what you think. I'm gonna be middle of the road on this one and say, I'm not gonna necessarily recommend it, but I won't discourage you from investigating it either. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hit me up in the comment section down below. I try to engage with you guys there. You want to leave me a comment about what you liked about the video, what you didn't, ask me any questions. I'll be there for you. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Also, check out this video. That's the 75-inch 6 series from TCL. I think you want to see that. And as always, visit digitaltrends.com for the latest tech news and reviews.